Hello. If you're seeing this, that means we still exist on planet Earth. I'm so excited, so excited. My name is Jordan Hales, and you are watching, listening to, experiencing during or after the fact the history textbook that I deserved, that we deserved. We got people coming into the room. I'm so excited for this conversation. Some of my favorite peoples in the world are here. I feel like I'm surrounded by so much love. Like this is incredible. This is incredible. Oh my gosh. We're gonna start officially at the 3:05 moment. So this is our time together. Oh my gosh. So much, just so much love. All of my favorite people. Oh, all of my favorites. This is like a miracle. Hello, everyone. Does everyone want to introduce themselves? Because you all need to know each other. Like, you don't have to, but I think it would be great. Mitch is
Go
going.
ahead, Cami. Oh, I'm going.
Mitch goes first. He said it. He does it.
Mitch Doherty, longtime friend of Jordan Hales. Excited about her new project and that amazing wall behind her.
Super amazing.
Just the thoughts that keep coming.
They're actually not even my thoughts. They're a collection of which I think is great. Oh my gosh, this is literally all of my favorite people are coming. So, and Mitch, where are you tuning in from?
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. All right, who's next? Who's next?
I'll go. I'm Cami Chaos, a longtime fangirl and admirer and friend of Jordan, who's one of the most exquisite creatures on the planet, but I think you all already know that. I'm super excited to hear about your latest project. I wish that little Jordy had this book. I wish little Cami had this book. I wish little everyone had this book. I think our world would be a different place if they had. And I'm also here from Portland, Oregon. And Rick is in the background. You might hear him talking every once in a while. He had another call he had to be on right now, but he sends his love as well.
Rick behind a curtain, just like the Wizard of Oz, is perfect. Like all of this just
I feel like is he always lurking behind the curtain, you know, just doing the thing?
yeah.
All right, who's next? Who's next? All right.
Khalil.
Oh, who is this?
Hey, how you doing? It's Khalil. I'm here from San Diego.
Hey, Khalil.
How you doing? Excited to support. I just wanted to echo the exquisite creature comment. Copy paste. Excited to be here to celebrate you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, this is literally nothing but love. This is favorite people central. This is ridiculous. Oh my gosh. All right, who's next? Introductions. We're starting officially at the 3:05 mark. So this is our time to chill.
I'll go. Hi, I am Jocelyn Rice, hailing from Eugene, Oregon, by way of Portland, Nebraska, Seattle, and now in Portland. Yes, echoing the same sentiments. New friend of Jordan's and exquisite. The way you taste life and how you show up in the world is such a inspiring and amazing thing. And just I can feel it coming through the computer, like how much everybody loves and wants to support you, and I'm here to do that too. And I'm so blessed I get to be here with all y'all today. So yes.
Who's next?
Hey, Kelsey. I'm from San Diego, and I'm just so excited. Proud to join us. You've been talking about this, being authoress, and so I'm excited to see what you got for us.
Oh my gosh, Kelsey, I feel like if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have stepped into my truest activist posture. So I feel like I need to at least give you like a portion of author credit here just for energy alone. Kelsey is one of the main co-organizers of March for Black Women San Diego, and all the things activists down here. So just amazing. All right, who's next? Christina?
Okay, I'll go. Hi, Jordan. So good to see you. Hi, everybody. I honestly never had the pleasure to meet Jordan in person. We only met online through like LinkedIn and yeah, just online. I'm just super excited to hear about this and your project and what you have to say.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I feel like I'm getting into my groove, like I'm coming down off of cloud 9. So like, okay, so Christina, what you need to know about Christina is like all things social media, Christina knows, like all things social media, and also all things Italy. So,
That's true.
and Jocelyn is the founder of Black Earth United, and I had the unique pleasure of hosting and moderating her conference where she brought all of these Black folks from the great outdoors who are leading in that space together to create a collective of stories and information and powerful connections. And Iris, who's about to go next, because I picked her, was one of the panelists. And Cami is like all things technology, all things like great person, and all things great nails. And so, and then Khalil is like dance theater, boom, bam, boom, all of the poetic thoughts. Like it's just a lot on here. And then Mitch, he just casually organized like all of the businesses in the consumer product ecosystem in Portland and Oregon, in the state of Oregon, so it's just like, real cash. So yeah, Iris, go ahead.
Okay, so I came in late, but I think I'm just supposed to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Iris. I am currently in Alabama. I met Jordan through Jocelyn, and I absolutely fell in love with Jordan when I read her website. I was like, who is this magical person? Like, I know you. And then just after the conference, she blew my mind. And then we've been kind of like she's been helping me create wonderful things. And I'm just in love with everything that she does and everything that she is. She's a magical, amazing person. And every time I talk to her, it's something else amazing coming from her. And I'm like, where do you have the space for all of this magic in your brain? So I'm just here to support.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate it. Iris is so dope and so talented, and love to always be in communication with someone who's also from Alabama. But this woman, y'all gotta watch her video on Instagram where it's a video or a photo with you playing with that snake. She drove all the way to Texas to learn how to handle snakes. All right, this is all things outdoors. Like, this woman is incredible. I could talk forever about her. Okay, last but certainly not least is the amazing, the wonderful, the only Curb. Curb, please introduce yourself.
Oh boy. So first of all, apologies if this is a bit rambly. I just got off a call with a person who gives me the energy that Jordan gives me. And so whenever we're on a call together, first of all, it's just hard to get off those calls, right? It's because it's a constant flow of like, what if, and then, and you're suddenly building a new world parallel to this reality, but then bringing it back to reality in a very grounded, like necessary, essential way. And so that revolution is something that it's a bit of a drug in the best way that I wish I had a little more of, as I know you all wish. And I think like contributions like this book are probably going to give a lot more people access to that energy. So I'm really excited to hear about it. And thanks for inviting us all today.
Oh my gosh. So Curve is amazing. I don't even know how to describe you, Curve. Like an amazing organizational development, taking the human to like the greatest extent of its humanity development, sparkling great person. That doesn't even do it justice, but you know, whatevs. So basically everybody has the opportunity to get to know each other. And I think you all should seize it because it's some real powerful people on this call. But let's get started, shall we? Shall we? All right, my name is Jordan Hales and I am an intellectual. I'm an inventor. I'm a storyteller, I'm a dancer. And my job in the world, as I understand it right now, is to look at the world at all these different angles and ask the question, what's possible? What needs to change? What's possible given that change that needs to happen, right? What's impossible and how can we make that possible? And so you'll see me looking at a variety of different things, whether it's how we move in our meetings, right? That's something that I have looked at innovating. Whether it's how we deal with conversations about periods, right? I've looked at changing that, right? Whether it's how we deal with branding. I used to work with a psychic empathic medium and help brand large corporations, right? Very different, looking at different angles, right? Or whether it's looking at something as seemingly small as a textbook. But I'm gonna make the argument today that the small textbooks are actually much more important than maybe we give them credit, maybe we're thinking about all the time. But before I do that, I wanna introduce my co-host. She is amazing. She's about 6, 7 years old. She wears glasses. She doesn't like them, but the people know that, you know, she's got style. She's an elementary school superstar. It's who? It's Jordy. Give her a round of applause. Give Jordy that round of applause. This is our girl. This is our girl. This would not have been possible without Jordy. She was and is a spectacular little force who doesn't know that she's only 5'3". I think she thinks that she's 6'3", but she's not. I don't even think she was 5'3" at that point, but we'll just, you know, we'll just give her that at this time. But she is my co-author, and you are looking at an experience about a history textbook in the making, specifically the history companion guide that I needed in the first grade, and specifically, this is the history textbook of the future. Now, the main question that I want us to look at today is, who do we become as a result of our history textbooks? If you don't get anything else out of this process at all, this is the one question that I want you to ask over and over and over again, right? And why do I say over and over and over again? Because what I'm about to invite you into is not just a static PDF or a static stack of print. It is ultimately a process and a practice, something that I'm going to want students to come back to over and over again, the teachers who are teaching them to come back to over and over again, and also adults. I say that this is the history book that little Jordy deserved in the first grade, but to be honest with you, this is the history book that I need right now. Number one, I don't know all the facts that I need to know, right? But number two, I don't have a firm, continual, permanent grasp on all of the ideas that I'm going to present to you today, right? It's something that I'm practicing. So bring that into your heart. Now, the second question, and I'm so glad that I doodled this out. I love my doodles, and shout out to everyone who supports my doodles, but how does a textbook gain your trust? Does anyone know why I would ask why a textbook might need to gain your trust? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Do you want someone to weigh in?
Yeah, weigh in.
Because every textbook I've ever read was skewed from someone else's perspective and taught me what they wanted me to know, not what was true.
So there's this skewing, there's this breach that happens, right? This breach that happens. And so when I was doing this, I said, you know, how does a textbook gain? And I was about to write your trust only, but then it was your, our, my, and then also its own trust. Because every time a person or an organization breaches trust somehow, it affects them, honestly, as much as it affects the other person. They may not feel it, they may not recognize that, but it does, because at any moment in time, we are with ourselves, right? And we are looking at ourselves. And the trust issue is huge because I've been someone who's broken trust. I've broken my own trust, right? I've broken someone else's trust. And I've also been the recipient of broken trust, right? And neither one of those things felt good. So I think this is a really great question to explore. Now, going back to who do we become as a result of our history textbooks? Well, first thing that I'll say is I became somebody with scoliosis because my textbook was heavy, all right? And it was sitting alongside other textbooks that were heavy. And so I was over there, I was scrunched over, right? With my little bows and my little curls. And if I had only gotten into the rolling backpack sooner, right, then maybe my spine could have been saved. Now, more and more kids are looking at digital textbooks, but we still do have physical textbooks. And I think that physical textbooks are important. But the scoliosis issue, that matters. And Jordy is not happy about that. But also, I want to read a statement that describes who I became as a result of my textbook. When I was in first grade, and I'm gonna stop screen sharing for a second because I really want to look y'all in the eye when I say this. When I was in first grade, I had a hunch that something was up. It was a pure intuition. It was not based on what somebody had told me. My mom and dad didn't tell me. My grandmama didn't tell me. Pookie and them didn't tell me. No one told me, right? But I knew whenever that moment that Miss Brunson, my first grade teacher, started talking about Christopher Columbus, whenever I saw that information in that textbook, I knew that that information was inaccurate. And I didn't know why. But I also didn't say anything, right? Until maybe about the 7th grade. And then I started saying things, but it was mostly a complaint, right? And don't get me wrong, if you don't have any other means of releasing the feelings that you got going on, right, then a complaint is a perfectly fine thing to do. Also, I'm a comedian. Comedians complain all the damn time, right? But a complaint didn't actually represent addressing the issue, right? As a little girl, I didn't feel like I could feel a thing and then express that thing and ask that that thing could be addressed. And I really want more kids to be in a position where they are trained to be in tune with their feelings, right? And their intuitions, as well as the facts as they've come across, to have a safe space to be able to express, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Something seems off. I don't really think this dude discovered America when people were already there, right? And then be able to ask questions to the teacher like, hey, Miss Brunson, why is it that they are describing Christopher Columbus in this way, right? What are the thoughts behind that? But I didn't have that. Instead, here's what happened for me. Here's my journey. All right. Now we've got some really good readers on this call. So I'm going to assign everyone a line and everyone gets a chance to read it. And then I'm going to read it in my own voice. All right, let's see here. Kelsey, you there? Let me get you to do the first line from deliciously petty judgments to savory intellectual curiosities. All right. Let's see here. Cammie, you next. Nope, I'm changing it. Curb, you next. You there? I want you to read It's a Constant Journey Until I Never Met. Do you see that?
Yeah.
All right, great. And then Cami, I want you to read from And Only Ever to Told Stories About. All right. You got it? And then Mitch, if you're still there, don't know if you had to hop off or if you're still there, but Mitch, I want you to read A Man All the Way from 1492 and An Ocean That Was Supposedly Blue. Can you do that?
Yep.
All right. And then Khalil, I want you to read From Who's all the way to Textbook. Can you do that for me?
Got you covered.
All right. And then Iris, I want you to come in real Southern with y'all know who I'm talking about, right? And then Jocelyn, I want you to round us out with the It's Christopher Columbus Day and His Story. And then Christina, I want you to take us from And all the way to This. Y'all got it?
That's good.
All right, let's go.
But that could be another opportunity where
Okay.
an organization like yours provides the platform or the validation for.
I think that's Rick. I think that's Rick's lovely voice. I can't wait to celebrate that. All right, Kelsey, kick us off.
From deliciously petty judgments to savory intellectual curiosities.
It's a constant journey trying to understand why I have hated a man who I've never met.
And only heard very poorly told stories about.
A man all the way from 1492 and an ocean that was supposedly blue.
Whose name wasn't even what they say it was in my first grade history textbook.
Y'all know who I'm talking about.
It's Christopher Columbus Day, his day and his story.
And as a society, we get to decide what are we going to do with this.
Oh my God. Now, what you all have willingly participated in, all right, is a sampling of a kind of oral history recording, right? Of a potential passage in a textbook, right? Where you get different voices that get a chance to be heard to contribute to the story, right? And this is my journey. You know, I have judged Christopher Columbus since I was a little girl. And to be honest with you, I'm tired of hating this man. I'm really tired of hating this man. What he did was atrocious. I'm not going to get into it, but I also am really not here for, 500-year-old issues. Like, I'm just like, I'm really not here for that. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to free up space in my heart. And a part of freeing up that space was asking more questions. And you see the part where I said, whose name wasn't even what they said it was in my first grade history textbook. Think about it. Christopher Columbus was not from an English speaking place. He wasn't, right? So as a part of our narrative, right? As a part of something that we have consecrated into our state, local, and federal practices and processes, not to mention our educational processes, right? We're calling this man by the wrong name. And I think there's a reason behind that, even though I don't know all of the history for it, right? But he had an Italian name because he was from Italy. And there are other sources that say that even the Italian name that we know of his may not have even been his real name, right? So this digs deeper into what are we getting? What are we being presented, right? And I think we have an opportunity to really talk about that. Well, let's go deeper. So most of the time students go with the flow, right? They're not really asking big questions about their textbooks. And if they do, it's kind of in passing, right? And maybe in some cases they are getting to the point where they're asking questions. And we're gonna go deeper into that because I want you to start listening to the sound of questions. But also when you are looking at questions, then you also have to look at receiving. Well, you don't have to, but you do get a chance to because it is a cycle, right? It's a process. If you ask for something, you're supposed to receive an answer, right? Sometimes kids are in a posture of not receiving. Sometimes adults are in a posture of not receiving. And other times we're in this posture of openly receiving and having an open mind, right? And what this textbook is aiming to do is really get kids and anyone who reads this book, right? Because I really do think that this book is going to end up being as much for adults as it is for students. But to get them in this area of openly receiving, right? Now, let's talk about listening to the sound of a question. I could ask you a question, right? Example, what do you mean by that? That's the second thing. If you don't get anything from this talk, take this question and ask it all the time. Ask it every day. Ask it even about things that you think you already know something about, right? But I can ask this question in a lot of different ways. I can say, now what the heck do you mean by that? Right? That's one energy. That's probably somewhere around judgment. Like, you said something, I'm not really feeling it, I judged it, but somehow I managed to ask you a question about it, right? Or you could ask it like this. Now, I heard such and such was talking about John the other day. And I'm just wondering what he meant by that, because I need to know. I need to have that together. You're not really interested in what's going on with John. You're just trying to get the tea, trying to get the gossip, right? It's a nosy question, right? Or I could ask, yeah, they always lie. I wonder what they mean by that, because you can't trust them. It's always something with them, and that would be more in line with skepticism, right? And then we look at curiosity, and you get a chance to say, wow, I wonder what they mean by that. That's really interesting. Like, I feel like there's so much more here. Like, there's so much more. And all of these things are different ways that our societies are starting to ask questions, right? And be in posture. And a key thing for this book, and I'm gonna stop sharing, I'm gonna go to the whiteboard. Key thing for this book is this major intellectual pivot. Teaching kids facts isn't working. When I first started thinking about this project, I was actually working on something else, and it was asking people to advocate for history to be taught correctly, right? Seems simple. But then I started to dig deeper, and I said, wait, what is it that people even remember from their history class, right? So I started asking people, and the answers to this question were magnificent. Like, some people remembered how Samuel was dressing real good every day and he was super cute, and they really liked to look at his haircut every day. Like, some people remember what a student was doing in class, right? And other people remember, man, my history teacher was fantastic. They just had this great voice and they would present things so magically. And so they remember something about the characteristics of their history teacher, right? And then other people were like, I don't remember nothing. It was all lies anyway, and I really wasn't that interested. So I really didn't learn anything, right? But it's very rare that I ask, what do you remember from history class? And people just start spouting out facts, facts on facts on facts on facts on facts, right? And the closest thing that we tend to get is that people remember what I'll call myths. They remember more like a stereotypical version of a very generalized story, right? Well, Columbus came and sailed the ocean blue and the Nina, the Pinta, and Santa Maria, and ate with the pilgrims, and it was cool, and somehow we got Thanksgiving, and the founding fathers, they did a great thing, Constitution, that was awesome. And, there was some slaves back in the day, but Abraham Lincoln did, he took care of that. Civil War happened. It was a little bit rough, but we came back together and we were one as a country. And, and it was pretty cool. So stories like that, stories that really, they're not saying much, but at the same time, they're saying a whole lot, right? And this is what history textbooks on the whole tend to do, is they reinforce this myth, like a more cloudy story, a more subconscious story, rather than this set of facts, right? And so the solution that most people want for textbooks is to change the facts to the correct facts, right? That's a change, and that's reasonable, right? That's the least that people could do, is change it to the things that have been most researched, most proven, right? Such that we have a solid historical record. But if we do that, we get to ask the question, what happens next? And what happens next is that the facts are hard to read. They're hard to read. What do I mean by that? How many of you have read another book that's supplemental that's about Black history and the reality of Black history, right? How many of you have read Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of the United States, and read about what Christopher Columbus actually did in detail? It's difficult. It is not PG-13. I don't even think it's R-rated. It's horrible. It's horrible, right? And so then we get to ask this question, well, how are we going to deliver the facts if they are so emotionally tough, right? And I'm not just talking about for kids, I'm talking about for adults. People around this country right now are going through crazy things. Like each of us have been pushed to emotional brinks, right? So how do we take care of that? So one of the pivots for this book that is foundational is that instead of teaching kids history, we're teaching them to be historians. So teaching kids to be historians. And that means we're asking them to look at things and want to discover more and want to document. But we're also making another pivot because the Western tradition of becoming a historian is limited in how it approaches things. It tends to only value written things. It tends to only value a supposed objectivity, right? And it tends to only value, and I think that's within the nature of the objectivity, it's kind of coldness, right? It's just kind of cold. When you think about the textbooks, were they interesting? Type a 1 in the chat box if your textbook was fascinating, right? Type a 2 in the chat box if you were bored when you read it. I won't be able to see it, but y'all know y'all's answers. Hold on, I might be able to see it. I'm getting twos. I'm getting twos. I'm getting twos, and nobody's saying that they had the most riveting thing, right? Kelsey gave it a 1.8, giving me Virgo, giving me specific. I appreciate it. And Curb gave us 2.2, also giving us Virgo, giving us specific, right? So, you know, they just weren't. So the next pivot that we get a chance to give students, right, is yes, be a historian, and also remember that you are human. And the key weapon that humans have is stories and storytelling from a real point of view, right? Now, if I'm teaching kids to be historians, that means I'm going to give them questions much more so than I give them statements, right? And so that's not to say that you won't have statements at all. It's just to say that the ratio of question to statements is going to be shifted, right? And to be central. So let's take a look at this. Save this. And let me show you a couple of things. So I'm going to show you a sampling of version 1.1 of this book. Now, it doesn't accommodate all of the things that we talked about, and I'm going to tell you why I've got different versions. And I'm also going to go over why it's a companion guide, right? One of the things that you'll notice is, wow, it's really big font. Those are some really big letters, right? Those are one single sentence taking up a page. That pivot is on purpose because most history books are what? Information dense, right? They're information dense. But this is giving you one sentence that you can just focus on as a part of your practice, right? All right, I'm going through the History Companion Guide. Today, I'm looking at page 1 that says, do not believe everything you read. Now, this is an important pivot because it accomplishes a couple of things. Number one, it's honest, right? Because the next statement is including this book. Now, what history book has offered up to you that maybe you shouldn't believe it? Probably none of them. And this is important because this is a trust building exercise, right? I'm not removed from having a perspective. I don't have direct access to facts. I don't. I'm a human being. And some days I'm out of my mind, right? So I might as well go ahead and confess that, right? Then an open statement that this book is open to being wrong, and this is key. Because if the book is open to being wrong, then that means that there's an opportunity for us to be in dialogue about how to get it to be more effective and how to make it be more right? This also says the majority of this book is blank pages. And that's another important shift. That's important because, well, normally you can't write in your textbooks, even if they're digital. Y'all remember that experience, right? You can't write in it. And what does it mean when you are able to write in the textbook? Somebody tell me what makes the difference when you're able to write in the textbook and that's the actual purpose of it.
You're allowed to personalize it, to take notes and to question things and underline and ponder things. It makes it your own and you can dive deeper.
Exactly. I love that. You're allowed to personalize it. Who else? What else happens when you have access to blank pages and you not only have the option to write in them, but you're supposed to write in them? That's a part of the design.
Allows you to become a historian, like you say. Allows you to become the historian.
That's right. It allows you to become the historian. Yes. Who else? Take one more person.
Yeah, mine was similar. I was just saying that it gives you an opportunity to be a contributor and not just a consumer.
Yes, to be a contributor and not just a consumer. That's huge. It's massive. And there are a lot of reasons that I want kids to become a part of the historical process. Number one, and this is reflected in that page number 9 where it says this is a mirror, even though clearly that's not a mirror. We're all a part of history. We're literally all a part of history, but we're not all a part of the history writing process. And this book is seeking to change that, right? Number 2, your own personal history may be the most important history that you'll ever learn, right? The histories that are more close to your person. So whether that's your history, what you did last year, right? That's a history. What your mom and dad or grandmother did, that's a history, right? What your local community did, what they were doing on the street where you live 10 years ago. That's a history that's really important. And our educational system is not very focused on the child learning about themselves and learning about that personal sense of agency as much as we are oriented towards giving them a particular prescription. And this is not to say that it's all bad giving kids like a set of something, but it is to say that it is very important to open up kids to what they bring to the table. And we all bring something to the historical record, right? I need to get somebody to say that for me. We all bring something to the historical record. Somebody say that.
We all bring something to the historical record.
Go ahead, hit us with it, Jocelyn.
We all bring something to the historical record.
Absolutely. So we're talking about changes, and I haven't even outlined all the different changes, but I want to take a look at this. We are in the midst of a revolution, and I put moment down at the bottom. The revolution equals change, but which changes and why, right? That's a story. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But the moment equals revolutionary, which equals change, right? So the moment equals change. That's where we are. But the question is, will the moment actually be a movement, right? Will the civil rights moments be a movement? Will the political moments be a movement, right? And also with education, will the educational moments be a movement? And that's going to depend. It's going to depend on us. Like I was just writing like a mad person with this. Depends on what am I deciding? Like what are my decisions? What are my priorities? Where am I directing my energy? Where am I placing my focus? and where am I putting action behind, right? And change requires that we change point of view, attitudes, thoughts, practices, commitments, standards, and stories. And I want to illustrate that for a second. Now, this is the world, and I want you to pretend like these are two people, 1 and 2, right? And if I change their perspective, I can change their positioning and how they're looking at the globe. That makes sense, right? Now, but their perspective is also influenced by a way of thinking, right? So this is, I don't know these shapes. This is cute diamond thinking. This is soccer ball thinking. This is cone head thinking. This is flat rectangle thinking, all right? So let's see here. We're gonna name this person Jake. Let's see if I can get Jake a name. Jake, hey Jake, how you doing? Jake, Jake's living his best life. Jake has square thinking, all right, flat square thinking, and his attitude is, hold on one second. His attitude is light, all right? That's how he rolls with things. And this person over here, this person is gonna be Shaniqua, and Shaniqua's super cool. Shaniqua has soccer ball thinking. Uh-oh. Let's see if Shaniqua's gonna be able to find her thinking brain. She may not be able to. Let's see here. Shaniqua, you deserve better than this. You deserve better than I was able to give you, girl, but she got soccer ball brain, okay? And her attitude is love. Her attitude is love. Oh, she got her love. It's big love. Her soccer ball brain, right? And so when we are talking about change, we really need to evaluate our different ways of thinking and our attitudes and our perspective, right? And I'm asking that of you all, but I'm also ultimately asking this of the educational system. And I'm going to tell you why this is important. And I'm going to talk to you not about Jake, but about me versus a political mailer, a 2020 exclusive. So when I started building this book, it was for little Jordy, but then I had to admit, oh, I kind of need this too. I need to be more curious about things. So I got a political mailer, and I'm going to show it to y'all. Don't get triggered. Can you see it? It says, make San Diego great again. And then it has 2 candidates on the side, right? And so the story that this political mailer is telling me was that, oh, this lady named Barbara, super conservative, she is going to bring the conservatism back. And it was really well laid out. I just looked at it, I said, oh, Barbara is conservative. Okay, I see you, Barbara, in these streets. Anyway, I went about my business, and that was what I was believing. And then I got curious about something. I said, I keep on saying that San Diego is conservative, but I wonder if it really is. Let me check to see how many politicians are Republicans or Democrats, because that would give me, that would give me some insight. And I only asked that question because I've been working on this book, and I've been in the process of like, what questions do I need to ask next? What questions do I need to ask next? So I go online and I look and I see Barbara's name, and Barbara had a D by her name, D for Democrat. And I said, wait a minute, I just got a mailer that said, make San Diego great again. And now they're saying that Barbara is a Democrat. What is going on, right? So my skepticism was showing up then, right? But curiosity was what brought me here. Curiosity was what brought me here. So I look at the thing, and I'm reading it. And lo and behold, in the corner, in the tiny corner down here, I see ad paid for by Neighbors for Housing Solutions supporting Todd Gloria for San Diego Mayor 2020. So this is not Barbara's flyer. And in my mind, now this is key now, in my mind, I interpret it as, this is Todd's flyer. That's what my mind did, right? So now I'm like, that Todd, he sent me This stuff trying to trick me, full skepticism, full skepticism. I'm not finding out any good information right now, right? Because I'm just in skepticism, I'm closed off. And so then I went back and I read it again, returning to the matter. And I realized, no, this was paid for by an association that is supporting Todd. So I don't know if Todd actually signed off on this or not, right? But look at the layers, right? I eventually went to the website. I went to Barbara's website. She has said some conservative things, but she's not what this mailer was implying, right? And I looked at Todd and he seemed all right. He seemed cool. But look how many layers there were that I had to go through, right, in order to try to get to some semblance of truth. And the thing that ultimately protected me was my curiosity, right? So I want to share kind of the vision that I have for the world right now. I think that right now we're moving towards defensiveness and skepticism. That's what I think we're moving towards on every side, at every angle, and almost every person. And what I mean by that, think about if somebody is trying to attack you, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to close off and you're going to do this, right? You're not going to be like, oh my gosh, attack me now, darling. You know, like that's just not the posture that you're going to take. And so with us doing this, sometimes we ask questions, but we ask questions like this. So the skepticism is ultimately it's going to cause a distance, right? And what I noticed with the history textbooks is that the history textbooks replicate this distancing. And let me explain what I mean by that. Pull up the whiteboard again. Go to a different page. First off, there's this distance between the students and the experts, which are the historians. Now, this is not to say that teachers don't serve a role. They do. They serve a very important role, but we do need to acknowledge that there are people who are deep diving into very specific lanes, right? And they have rich experience. They're spending all day, every day looking at something, right? But yet there's a lot of distance between them. The other form of distance that exists is between the students and the people in the history books. Now, let me explain to you what I mean by that. So you see the people in the history books, they may look like you, they may not look like you, right? That's one form of distance, right? That you may not see yourself represented. And I mean that in a lot of different ways. I mean that racially, I mean that in terms of gender, I mean that in terms of sexual orientation, I mean that also in terms of ability, I mean that in terms of economic class, in how a person talked, whatever, in all of the senses. But also when you see people that are there, students typically, even if the person has done a lot of good, they don't tend to identify with those people as humans. They don't tend to identify with them as people that exist on the human possibility range, right? And what does that mean? When you either hold someone up as an idol or you hold someone down as a villain, right? That means that the world just becomes this kind of like thing that's moving between like these black and white edges. It becomes really extreme and not something that you can deeply relate to. When people start to tell stories that are deeply human, everything opens up. I don't know if you all have been following Humans of New York, but Humans of New York is an example of a continuing historical record that is done by a photographer and someone who really is good at getting deep conversations. When people read those stories, they see themselves, right? And that's key. We have the opportunity to start writing history textbooks that when you read them, you see yourself. Why? Because all of us have a range of possibility to be absolutely horrible, to be absolutely wonderful, and to be absolutely mundane. And I want to show you a section of the book that seeks to address this. All right, 1 second. Now, this is important. When I first sat down to do this book, And I was like, well, what type of history book are you gonna write, girl? Because you're not a historian. And you're definitely not gonna share any facts because you don't know any facts. You ain't got no facts for the people. All right. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna bring my particular flavor. And so it was like, what is that? And so I said, the first page, I need to hit them with something big. It's got to be a mirror. The first page of the history textbook's got to be a mirror, right? They've got to see themselves, right? Now, I don't know how to make a mirror in a textbook, so I had to come up with another solution. And this is what I did. Let me share this with you. Now, what you're looking at is about 100 pages of textbook, right? Some blank, some not. And started off with this page saying this is supposed to be a mirror, but it's clearly not, right? And then I have this section, and this section is really important. People like you made history, and then that repeated over and over again. Because it's not going to be clear from the current textbooks that people like you did make history. Second, people unlike you made history. And this is crucial. People need to know that someone who was very different from you did something that was important to the historical record. Also, people like you didn't make it into the history books. Just stating that plain. And then focusing on the fact that that doesn't mean that they didn't exist or that they didn't do important things, right? And also asking, and how do we know when a thing that is done or a person who exists is important? And this is inviting us to say that not everything that is big is important and not everything that is small is unimportant. Microhistories, which is what this book is inviting kids into, and that's shown later in the book. Microhistories are the willingness to look at a very small moment and go deeply into it, right? So to look at one person's history over a small period of time and write that as though it is important. Right? And then this section continues. People like you did extraordinary things, ordinary things, made mistakes big and small. People like you did absolutely nothing. And I thought that this was critical because there is always some atrocity that we will all pass over and do nothing about, because if we were to try to address everything, we wouldn't be able to. It's too much, right? But I also wanted to call into light that there are times when you do absolutely nothing when you could have done something, right? So to address both of these. I wanted to honor the people who work behind the scenes, because oftentimes the story that's told is not inclusive of the people who are doing work behind the scenes. And then I wanted to get extra real, right? So we're going back to the trust piece. This book is propaganda. It is not neutral. It can't be. Times are too interesting right now, right? So I could have made the claim that this book was super objective. It's not. I'm not an objective person. I'm dramatic. I love flair. I love big things, right? I love exaggeration. Just who I am. That being said, you can put this book down right now and never read it again. Or you can continue. Your choice. Consent. You did? Right? And I think this is interesting. I think we need to take every opportunity that we can to introduce the consent conversation into places. People don't get it. People who do get it only get it superficially. And I do think that students get an opportunity to say, yes, I want to learn about something, and no, I don't. And I think that can be a reform to our educational system. Now, this is another major pivot for this book. Can you let me know what decision you made? How many of you ever talked to your textbook author? Right? Type 1 in the chat box if you talk to your textbook author. Who was that extraordinary student who talked to them? I know somebody out there did. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. And I was popping A+ out left and right. I was on it, you know? Let's see, did we get a 1? Did we get a 1? I can't see down at the bottom. But this is an important pivot. I imagine creating a system, and I don't have all of the pieces worked out, but where students will actually have access to not only the people who have written the books, but also to critical experts. So I see students moving through a historical period and they know who the experts are because they've sought them out. And experts are seeking to be in conversation with them somehow on a regular basis, right? Again, I don't know the logistics of this, but this is the vision. And then I tell people what my agenda is. And I say, this book's goal is to get you CURIOS. Haha, that's not a word, right? So this is again about tone and about humanness. Curious, this book's goal is to get you curious, right? And then it continues on. Now, what's important about this is that what you've seen thus far is a written book, but there are different versions of this book, and I'm going to show you the versions and kind of the vision for the collective. But before I do that, I want to help you all to understand how this book is positioned as a companion, because I think that that's really important. So the companion is really, really interesting. I'm going to bring up, hold on a second. All right, this is an archetypes and branding book. Mitch, you know this one. This is the one that I tried to, I try to come with my little tools all the time, but I want to read to you about the companion. So the companion starts off with a quote. "The most I can do for my friend is simply to be his friend. I have no wealth to bestow on him. If he knows that I'm happy in loving him, he will want no other reward. Is not friendship divine in this?" So the companion is a trusted support. That was Henry David Thoreau. The companion is a trusted support who can be relied upon to lend a helping hand. This archetype holds a deep respect for each person's value and inherent worth and shows it by offering assistance, order, and a sense of belonging. And I think you've seen some of those things here, especially that sense of belonging with the People Like You series. Typically good-natured, the companion is a comrade through the ups and downs of life. And we talked about the facts being difficult, right? So helping them to navigate the ups and downs. The companion is essentially a friend and a confidant, right? That confidant is those pieces where you get a chance to write in and you also get to write to, offering help and listening without measure or judgment. And there's more to this. The strengths of the companion are loyalty, detail orientation, determination, practicality, and patience. The challenges are betrayal, jealousy, loss of self, and prone to dependency, just looking at the archetype there. But this is critical. So the companion guide is designed to accompany the historical record, right? So you've got the student who's here. The student could be anyone. They could be young, they could be old, they could be me, they could be you, it could be anyone, right? And somehow you are looking to have a relationship with history. Cammy's gotta go. See you later, Cammy. All right, Mitch is gonna go. All right, so the student of history, right, is what you are becoming. Now, the companion guide is meant to help to interface between you all. Now, maybe you're learning history from a teacher. Maybe you're learning history from a textbook. Maybe you're learning history from the History Channel, right? It doesn't matter. Whoever, whatever, or wherever is teaching you history, this companion is helping to interface with you, to help you get into a practice of asking questions, believing that you are culturally relevant, and practicing more curiosity than you do skepticism, nosiness, judgment, etc. Right? And I view this also as kind of like an intellectual creativity, a kind of art, and I want to show you the different versions, and then I want to open up for just questions and discussions for the last 25 minutes or so of this. I had a vision and I saw myself standing in an art gallery. And in the art gallery, there was all of these different books that were sitting out there. Like, it was so cool. And the world had changed. Like, instead of people protecting themselves with defensiveness, they were like layered in this cloak of curiosity that was their protective nature. And it didn't matter, young, old, you know, wherever they were from, like, they were protected because they would ask beautiful things, not because they would do this, right? And so in this, I see all these different versions of the history book, and I want to show those to you now. So version 1 is Jordy's version. You know, that's where I'm designing for one particular person, which is this little girl, right, who is in 1st grade. And it's also, we're really designing this together. Like, she informs it, my 34-year-old self informs it, and she also informs it, and it makes something great because of it. And that's how it starts out. And then I want to get a chance to really go deep into Jordy's story, right? And so go deep by also doing an oral history, right? Where I get the students who went to Council Elementary School to do audio recordings of themselves doing the People Like You series, right? And also a podcast where I get a chance to finally talk to the people who were involved in this. And I want to show you a version. Let's see if I can find it. I can't find it. No, that's all right. I'll show you something about that later. But basically getting a chance to ask my mom and dad, what did they think about, you know, this? Miss Brunson, if she's still alive, what did you think about this? Why did you agree to teach this, right? Did you know it hurt my feelings? Probably not, because I didn't tell you. My principal, Mr. Lawrence, how did he feel about it? He just retired. He might be feeling footloose and fancy free and ready to give me all the tea on what he actually thought about it, right? Or maybe he was a full supporter of it. I don't know. Who was the superintendent back then? Like, we don't see enough conversations around the actual people involved who actually had the possibility to change something. And so I want to show that, right? Now, the next versions are with design. I want to dance with designers on this. I want to dance with industrial graphic software designers, all of them, and make different versions of this. It doesn't have to be a book. A textbook doesn't have to be a book, right? It just has to be a great resource and a standard. I've seen a version of this that is a mirror and the text like shows up digitally on top of it, but you always see yourself through the text or the image, right? I really want to play around with how we can integrate the full human experience into learning, because I've learned history while talking to my grandmother on the phone, as much as I've, you know, while laying on a couch, as much as I've learned it while I was sitting in a classroom. So what tools would I need to remember this practice of going deeper, right? And going to my companion to walk with me through history. Version 3 is by students. And this one is really critical. I want to empower groups of students to make their own history books according to how they want to do it. I think what's going to come out of this is going to be fabulous. And I think the process of it will really be agency building for kids. What does the history textbook start to look like when students make the majority of the decisions on how it's made, right? And so from this, I am going to take a group of students to create a version of it, but I'll also be creating a framework that other people can just take with them, right? And run with it to create their own history books. Lastly, and I'm really excited about this one, by communities. What does it look like for a community to write its own history textbook? This one is really inspired by my grandmother. I have to tell you the story of Ernestine. See if I can find Ernestine on here. I didn't put her in there. Put her somewhere. I must have deleted some of my slides. Anyway, she was telling me about how she learned how to drive. Well, I asked her, Grandmama, how you learn how to drive? right? And she said, well, I went down over to Bessie C. Fonville Elementary School, took the car, and I would drive laps around it, right? And I'd parallel park around it. Now, let me tell you something. I've heard of Bessie C. Fonville Elementary School, and the only thought I've ever thought about it is that is the country's name I've ever heard in my life, right? I had no context for it, and I really had no caring for it. Like, it just, just a little cute judgment, like, that's really country, Mobile, Alabama, But now I know that my grandmother learned how to drive around that school. And most history textbooks or most historians, if they were telling the story of that school, they probably wouldn't know that. And even if they knew it, they probably wouldn't include it, because we don't tend to prioritize the personal stories. We only tend to prioritize these larger stories from this grand mythology that's trying to be created, right? But that was really important because my grandmother's mother did not learn how to drive, and her mother did not learn how to drive. And they didn't learn how to drive because they had men in their lives that didn't want them to drive. But my grandmama was more like her daddy, okay, than she was like her mama. And her daddy, Alan Morgan, he was a firecracker. And so she told my granddaddy what was up. And my granddaddy, being the perfect Virgo that he was, he made it happen, So she got that car and she went on over to Bessie C. Fonville. And I want us to be able to tell histories and make history textbooks that look more like that type of fabric, right? So that's the broader vision. I think along the process that a lot of other things will come up. It has been nothing but a joy for me to go through this and to start this. I'm on version 1.2 officially of the book. And so I'm going to be sending a PDF that has the very imperfect and incomplete version, right? But it is still packaged as version 1.2 under the Geordie column. And I want you all to print it out, write all over it, send it back to me, right? Post notes about it, what you think. Because this is a textbook that is being created out loud that is about collective learning and collective processing. And that is yet another way that we just get to put everything on its head and be revolutionary. So I have 50,000 other stories that I could tell you, but this is it. This is the book. And I think that if I know I'm doing it, and I know that I'm going to advocate for it because it's my little idea, right? But I think there's also a lot of healing, a lot of honoring of ideas, a lot of opening people up, reestablishing trust with self, trust in educational systems, and practicing going to the source that's going to happen because of this book. And for this particular moment, I think we need to seize every opportunity we have to reestablish trust because it's eroding quickly. And we depend on that to survive. So thank you very much. I'm going to open up the floor for questions and general chit chat.
I would like to start, kick us off a little.
Okay.
Yeah. Little Kirby, probably age 9, kind of showed up during your presentation and started creating something for math and feeling a lot of feelings about math and enjoying math, but then it not being for little Kirby for various reasons, all socially constructed. And it just got me thinking about the students out there and teachers out there using this as kind of a template to help them create their own little companions that they would, right, have for their own subjects that come up that are challenging and upsetting and, and then, I don't know, I just kind of, this is what we do, right, Jordan? I was like picturing this kind of academy, of creators that could create the missing piece to these textbooks that are required, right? Math, science, art, whatever it is, history, and create their own bridges, to understanding the need to understand stuff to get through this educational system they struggle with. So I'm getting emotional about it, thinking about adults, right? I know who are still reliving, like in the workplace, reliving the feelings they had about the stuff I'm reading, the stuff I'm supposed to know does not resonate with me. I'm not able to connect this to the way I'm supposed to just show up practically at work, you know, and check those boxes. So I'm just thinking about the many, many applications and templatizing of this that could unfold. So thank you.
I love it. Yes. And say hello to little 9-year-old Curb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am, you know, I'm just so freaking proud of you and like excited to see this in the world. I was having a memory of little Kelsey when I was like in 3rd grade, like we like learned about ancient Egypt and did like an Egypt museum, right? But I'm thinking about the application of having students being their own historians and learning these things and then being able to teach others about what they've learned and like how that gives a sense of agency. And so I would be really excited to see that like being one of the iterations of this like history book is teaching students how to be their own historians and like docents of, you know, their like own exhibits. And
yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because in the very first version, and I haven't gotten to typing this out, there is this thing about becoming, getting each class to curate the history of their class and then put it on as a museum and then sell tickets for it. And the moment I'm like, and now you are a curator, you know, like, and then there's a section for like, and take out your phones, right? And pull the recorder on. And now you are a horror historian, you know what I mean? Like, so there's these sections and I think it's so important. And it's like, it's not just a little side activity. It's the main thing. So I love that, Kelsey. You're spot on.
I will say that I love the idea of becoming a community historian and a historian for your family. It really resonates with me now. My grandmother just passed, and I want to know so much about her. And asking other, and I had a great relationship with my grandma, and I know bits and pieces of her story, but I wish I would have had the tools to, you know, dive deeper. And I wish I would have known how to do that when I was younger and, you know, hanging out with her and talking to her. And my parents both are suffering memory loss. And like, a couple of years ago, I found this book that was called My Life Story. And so I will ask my mom questions and like, you know, just to get her like to tell me her life story. And like for a kid to have that and have those tools, be able to ask their parents so they know where they came from, they know about their past and their history. And I think it's really, really important for African Americans because we've lost so much because we've been told a different scenario, been separated, and just have those connections with community. I love outdoors and I love herbal plants, and I want to know so much about like our uses of herbal and medicinal and edible plants that we've lost. And this is something great that I can, you know, start applying those things when I'm going out and asking about the herbal medicinal plants of Alabama. So I love it because I have started recording my history and it just opens another thing. And it's a great tool for kids to have.
Yes. No, I really appreciate that. And I can relate. Like I'm thinking about all the times where I was just sitting with my grandma or I was just sitting with my great grandma. And I really didn't ask that many questions. Like I asked some questions, but I didn't ask a lot. And like now I'm like, I've got about 50 questions. And my grandmother the other day was like, I was like, can I record some of your stories? She said, no, they're my stories, my personal life. You can't have it. I said, darn it, grandmama. So I really
you're stuck trying to remember them. Because I was in Costa Rica and the lady I stayed with, she's 92 and she has these amazing stories. And I'm like, I'm going to remember them all. Like I've forgotten so many pieces and I should have just like, you know, hey, Mama Joy, can I record these? Because like her life is just, and whenever I talk to her, I'm now going to continue to be like, okay, let me ask you, you know, another question about this and like ask her to record it because, you know, you're not going to get, how many more opportunities am I going to get to talk to a 92-year-old lady from Costa Rica who lived in Mexico, Panama, the US, did all this amazing things, and just like, you were born in what, 1927? Like the history that's there.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Anybody else? I want to hear. What are your thoughts? What do you like? What do you love? What do you hate? What do you want to throw away?
Go ahead, Jocelyn. I saw that you unmuted yourself. We unmuted ourselves at the same time.
I was just gonna say I love, as a parent, also watching my son go through what he's going through now with school, and how it's not serving him the older he gets, as he's having to become more structured, and in a way that doesn't, I mean, structure's okay, but not in the way it serves him. And to have an opportunity to give a child back their power, and like this level of activism that's coming in with this book of like, you have a right to be heard and your opinion does matter, and how you see the world matters, and to not just accept this gratefulness for being taught by someone else. Like, you also have that opportunity to teach other people, from a child all the way to a grown-up, and like it's a level of power that you're giving back to people with this, and it's such a beautiful thing, and I can't wait to see all of the versions. And yeah, I was trying to think, in design we have this thing where you have to ask somebody to take something away, something to keep, and something to take, like, to ponder. But I really can't think of anything to take away. I guess maybe take out one blank page. I don't know.
I appreciate that. That's huge. It's huge. Thank you, Jocelyn. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, what I just want to add, kind of along the lines with everybody already said, but yeah, we're just kind of trained since we're so young. We're trained to be passive and just not critical, and just being there and get this information, and yeah, just not question it or being curious. I think that curiosity, for me at least, started kind of later in life, like almost like everybody said, like I wish my grandmother was still alive to ask questions about the wars and anything else. But yeah, I really didn't have the tools or the curiosity. So I'm just really excited for this. It's amazing project. Yeah. Yeah, I hope this will be realized, and I hope you can keep us in the loop with this. It's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's interesting. So much to say. What section, I'm curious, we have until 4:30. Hopefully you all can jam out with me and we can just chill and kind of talk through it. Like, you know, what part really resonated with you the most, that you were like, that right there, I need it? There are other parts that I didn't even get a chance to get into. I think that's one of the difficult things about this, is that there's so many elements that I'm looking to shift that I can't even like describe like everything that's a part of it. But I do want to know, of what was told and what was shown, what did you just latch on to and you were like, yep, that was a tool that I would move forward with, or that was the version that I would need?
I think for me, it's not necessarily a tool, but the framing of like, there are people like you who didn't make it into history books, and this doesn't mean that they weren't important, right? Because I think like it gives like this really powerful reframing of like the fact that these first person narratives weren't there isn't because they didn't exist. It isn't because they weren't chock full of history. It's also because like history is inherently biased and is inherently told by the people who have a vested interest in like maintaining the sense of a narrative. And so I think like these are things that we know, but I'm thinking of like at a young age, hearing that explicitly is such a opening. It's such an expansion of like what history means, because the textbooks that we get is we see some white men in 1776 and yay America, and like you don't hear the first person narratives of the indigenous folks or the enslaved Africans, you know. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that, Kelsey. And Kelsey, I'm hoping that you'll join in on the recordings when we do the oral history recording of the People Like You series.
Of course.
Who else? What was something that you really latched onto?
Of course, I was taking sections and creating activities to go with each, you know, like hands-on in real life, three-dimensional space activities for like all ages to do. And specifically the one where we see the earth and the location of the people, and then selecting the attitudes and the thought, attitudes and ways of thinking, and giving each, you know, person an opportunity just for themselves to sit down and think about that. Like, just what's my attitude, you know, rather than like, you know, that reactionary, oh, you know, judging others' attitudes or ways of thinking as being more or less right. Like, doesn't matter. It's just a way of thinking. It's not right. You know, it's just, it's what it is. So it's what it is versus seeing it as something that is acceptable or something to reject. And I could just see, I started seeing youth in a space, 5th and 6th graders actually doing this, and then, you know, drawing out their own shapes of thinking and describing it to each other, or even grabbing an item off the shelf and being like, this is the shape of how I think, and this is what that means. And then I started seeing executives, you know, my two groups, kids and executives doing the same thing and trying to describe that, not getting to use any of the terminology from their world, right? Their executive world, like having to use different terminology and come at it from a different, and just what that could do. So yeah, that was a whole activity, like a whole one of your maybe boxed sets, right, of activity that goes with the book. So let me know when you want to talk about that stuff.
I love this. I love it. See you, Kelsey. Bye. No, I love that. I love the way you're thinking. I also want to call out that there was, in my like panels, there were 2 Virgos, 2 Geminis, and 2 Earth signs. Like all, like I was just like, this is really interesting. All right. Okay. What else?
I loved kind of the format and how you use really ignorantly large words in like font, because it is stressful when you go to a history book and you're trying to learn, like, and it's just like all of this, like, but you took it in a way, you designed it in a way that is digestible and not intimidating. And I think that's great for a person like me and the way my brain thinks and works. And I used to substitute teach, and I always think about me growing up and how I learned, and always wishing that there was a different way for my brain. And I know like there's supposed to be all these different learning styles, and scaffolding is extremely hard for teachers, but you're providing a companion that they like, it gives the kids who don't learn facts like that a different way to work with their brain. And really, that just really spoke to me. I was just like, oh yes, this is beautiful. It's not 20,000 words on one page. Like, it's just 5 and I can do this. It's not intimidating. History, you made history not intimidating. And I love that.
I can appreciate that. I really can appreciate that a lot. So I have to take like the paper, like suppose this is the book, and I'll take like this edge, and then like I isolate a sentence, and then I'll read it, you know, only trying to focus on one sentence, because other than that, my eyes will just like dance all over the paper, you know.
Yeah, and you're not absorbing anything. It's like when I read a history, like I'm just like, okay, and only one cool fact I'm taking with me. What was the coolest thing? I'm like, okay, cool. He had gold shoes. That's awesome. And the rest of that, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what else you did.
Yes. Yes.
I agree. That is so true. I remember I was horrible in history in school. I just couldn't take it. It was overwhelming, just too much info. And it just didn't make sense. All this information didn't, there wasn't a continuum to me. And so I feel like, yes, like you are making us reflect, you know, you're asking questions, you're making us put in all these little points. Sorry, lack of English words here, but you're yes, you're just putting things together, I think, with this book, for kids, for students. So I needed this book. I need it now.
I feel that. I like that point about the continuum. So there are a couple of different versions of implementation. I won't go too much into it, but there's one version where this is the history book. Like you completely remove the standard books and this is the only text. And so the expiration is determined by what the children want to learn about and also by their personal histories. And this process, like I've got it down to like 5 tools. So it'd be like a set of 5 things that you would need to run through, right? Maybe you set a reminder, like on a weekly basis, you go back to the book, right? And you're going over those things, or you're listening to the audio, 10 minutes of it, you know, per day to kind of get you into this process and practice. But one of the other forms is that, like, you can take one piece of history and go far enough and you'll hit everything else. It's like the micro is universal, right? But also, like, we would learn this fact, but the fact is always situated within a bigger picture. And so I wanted to do something where kids would have this big 1-pager that they would be constantly referencing, such that, okay, we learned about the war and I can see that the war was associated timeline wise here, and these different people, oh, they were also involved in this thing. Like, how do we create a bigger picture versus just like a micro detail? So anyway, I love that. Jocelyn.
There were so many things. One, of course, I love blank pages. All of my books have so much writing in them. I write in every single book I have, and I always tell my son, like, to write in his books. Like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Maybe it's a library book now. But I love the idea of being able, like, I don't feel like I'm doing something wrong, because even as an adult, I feel like I'm doing something wrong writing in these books. And I'll have people, they'll borrow them and say, like, oh my God, like, what did you do to this book? So to be able to do that is dope. I love, like Curve, you were saying, this idea of, it reminds me, I've been in like every kind of therapy you can possibly imagine, but my favorite therapy I've ever had is art therapy. And it just reminds me of that. Like, I created this, they asked to take all the people I knew in my life and create a shape for them. And then all of my things were like 3-dimensional though, and it built up like a pop-up book, you know, like that. So I love the shapes and like feeling connection to that, which is incredible. But I'm curious, like, what's your favorite version that you're working on? So what's your favorite? What is the one you're having the most difficulty with, that we could possibly like ponder for you too? And what's the one that you that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love all of this. Yay for art therapy. I've never done art therapy, but I feel like I would enjoy it deeply. But I think the version, so I'm currently only working on Jordy's version, right? And so the framework that I've given myself is that each version gets a chance to have maximum of 9 iterations before it's done. And then I'm over it, right? So you have 1.1, 1.2, all the way down to 1.9, then it's done, right? And I had so much procrastination with little Jordy's version. And I think that it had to do with being insecure about, people aren't going to take this large font seriously. They're not going to take these blank pages seriously. They're going to laugh at me, and those voices aren't at the forefront of my mind, but they are in the background of my mind, and they're living their best life. And Mr. Rogers actually got me out of my funk to like own this little bit more. And I actually am quoting him in the book, and quoting him in the book presents like an opportunity for me, because the quote comes from an interview that he did with Charlie Rose. And Charlie Rose has now gone through this process of like, he's been implicated in a lot of like, what do we even call it? Sexual assault allegations, all this other type of stuff, right? And so, I'm like, well, how do I document this? How do I document this honestly? How do I document this fairly? How do I document this real? Does this require a trigger word? What does this require, Anyway, Mr. Rogers said that this is a noisy world and that we don't give people the gift of silence enough. And blank pages are visual silence. Maybe not all the time, but for the most part, metaphorically, they're visual silence, so that was really huge. I think also the thing that's been difficult for me to say was that there's a version of this textbook where it is the core textbook, and there's a complete reworking of how we teach all of this stuff around that. That was the most radical idea. And when I was first thinking about this, there was like, conservatives were sitting on my shoulder and they were like, they're never going to go for this book. They're not going to go for this. So design according to this, right? And then by conservative, I'm meaning people who I wouldn't necessarily agree with, people who might like enjoy the Christopher Columbus conversation as is, see you later curve, and wouldn't want to change it, right? And I was having trouble hearing who it was really for, which is for Jordy. And then Jordy, like one of my friends was like, this is really neutral. Like she was looking at one of my versions, she's like, this is really neutral. And I was like, huh. And I realized that if I design more for like the school system that I think won't budge, or people who I don't think that will agree with me, then ultimately I'm centering them more than I'm centering Jordy, which is the exact problem that I'm trying to solve for. So no, I'm going to center Jordy. I think the thing that I need the most help with are the last three versions. I'm really scared that the design versions won't happen. I think that's where like doing something that's really cutting edge and really cool, it's really outside of my skill set and demands like collaboration. Like, I'm like, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to enroll people to get into this, right? So like, but there are people that I think would want to work on this, you know what I mean? And would want to really drive that. But then with the other versions, like with the student versions, like getting the students to say, whether or not they would want to write the history textbook, and then us all working together to advocate for it actually being put into educational systems, And the last thing I'll say, and then if anyone has any other questions, I'd love to answer them, but it's like, this is critical because Donald Trump just put out a proclamation yesterday about Columbus Day, and accusing supposed radicals, right, of trying to erase history, and then also stating that he was going to do things, I believe, like to influence the educational systems in terms of how they teach things. And part of this is in response to the 1619 Project from New York Times, where the author of the 1619 Project really dove deep into like slavery in an honest way from the American, perspective. But there really are changing systemic things that are going to make it harder for good things like this to be in schools. So yeah, hopefully I answered the question. I know it was a long ramble, but yeah, anyone else have questions? I've got like 10 more minutes where I can chat, and I'd love to hear what you all are thinking and what you all want to know about.
I don't have a question. I just have just a thought, like Jordy is needed. Little Iris needed her. And there's so many kids that do. And I believe that even against what Trump is trying to do and what the conservative or what the norm is for the educational system, there are teachers that want this. And then not so just stopping with teachers, but parents. And with us going to so much virtual and digital, there is a space for it. And there's definitely a need for the other thinkers, the people who think like Jordy. There's definitely a need for it. And I just think it's beautiful. And when you brought up like the whole digital book and the mirror, I'm just like, how is she gonna, I cannot wait to see how you do this. Like my brain went to kind of your motives, like what she's gonna get with these engineers and da-da-da. I'm just like, but I know you can do it. Like I believe in you. And I'm already like, okay, can I just watch you create this masterpiece? Because like, if it's in your mind, then you can do it. You wouldn't be given the thought to create it if it can't be brought to light. And
Powerful.
Can't wait to see what you do.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful. I needed to hear that. If you're given the thought, then you're also given the capacity to somehow get it together. I love that. Jocelyn, see you later. Oh gosh. Christina, any questions, anything?
No, not really. I was thinking, I don't know, this is for a more probably traditional approach, like an actual book, but have you heard about a kid's book about?
Yeah, the series.
Yeah. It's just a thought that you even thought about pitching the idea to them. I don't even know if that's something that you would like to do.
No. I appreciate where you're going. Yeah, no, I had not thought about that. Yeah, no, that's also interesting, just thinking about the other brands that this might play well with, that's where it's leading my mind to go. So yeah, the first brand that I thought about was just Cliff Notes, because I think that was like the original companion guide that I ever had to anything. So yeah. Well, what was that?
Go ahead, Christina. There's also an app that I just downloaded. I don't know where it is in my phone. It might be called Lucid. I've been downloading a lot of apps, and it takes books and kind of like adds pictures to them. So it's helping you digest them. And just like, let me open up the app. Grit by Angela Duckworth, Deep Work by Cal Newport, The Black Swans, all these great, huge thinking, deep books. And like, they're putting pictures with them to help people like myself process this and have a connection with what they're really reading, instead of all of these thousands of words. Like, okay, I just read a whole bunch of stuff. Like, what's the nuts and bolts and how can I process this and really sit and think about it and not be overwhelmed with this whole chapter of words? Because when I have a whole chapter of words, like, it is literally like you take a sentence and like you're underlining and you're sitting with it, and you're people who can speed read through a book in like 2 days and like, how did you absorb anything? I'm just like, I need to dive deeper. I need to ponder and ask questions. So this is good. And there's like little droplets of what you want to do out there in the atmosphere, but the totality of what you're trying to do, it hasn't been done. So you're on the right path, and it's going to be amazing.
I can't wait to check that out. Oh my gosh. Well, I have got to run. It has been such a pleasure. Oh, such a pleasure. I'm really appreciative of y'all coming out and spending time with me. And thank you to everyone who also listens to the recording. I'm also very appreciative of y'all. We need all the energy that we can get. I've been like, to make sure that this moves forward, I just like would commit to doing like one small thing. And I've also learned a lot of lessons about how ultimately if you're a creator, then the ultimate responsibility is like your body and your mind and your spirit, because the idea is attempting to come from you, you know? And so a lot of self-care has come from this. But anyway, gonna sign off. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. What an amazing time. What an amazing time. What an amazing time. This is awesome. Little Jordy is happy. She's happy, but she's also hungry. So check you later. Bye, people who are listening to the recording.